Hello everybody, this is Mr. Laubach. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are going to dive into one of the most important yet overlooked pieces of legislation in early American history, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. So here's the situation. It's the late 1780s. The American colonies have won their independence from Britain, but the newly formed United States is still figuring out how to govern itself. The Articles of Confederation are in place, but they are shaky. Think of the Articles of Confederation as the first Constitution before the actual Constitution, which would not be ratified until 1789. One of the major challenges is how to divide the vast West lands the United States acquired after the Revolutionary War. These territories are rich with potential, but full of uncertainty. How will they be governed? How do they fit into the country? That's where the Northwest Ordinance comes in. Passed in July of 1787, the Northwest Ordinance was a blueprint for how the U.S. would expand westward, ensuring that new territories would become states with equal standing to the 13 colonies, which of course are 13 states now. Now, I know that might not sound like a big deal on the surface, but trust me, this legislation shaped the future of the United States in ways that we still feel today. Let's take a look at the key elements. First, the Northwest Ordinance established a government for the Northwest Territory, which would include what eventually would become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and part of Minnesota. So not the Northwest of the United States that we think of today, but where it existed at the time, which we now know as the Upper Midwest. The ordinance set up a framework where territories would govern in stages. Initially, the federal government would appoint leaders, a governor, secretary, and judges. But once the population of free adult men reached 5,000, they could elect a local legislature and send a non-voting delegate to the U.S. Congress. And here's an important point. When that population hit 60,000, the territory could apply for statehood and write its own constitution. This gave the territories a clear path to becoming states that were on equal footing with the original 13 states, which was a revolutionary concept at the time. Now let's talk about rights and freedoms. The Northwest Ordinance wasn't just about governance. It was also a statement of values. It guaranteed basic civil liberties like freedom of religion, trial by jury, and protection from excessive punishment. It also promoted the importance of education, a pretty forward-looking idea for its time. The ordinance stated that schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged, laying the groundwork for public education in these new territories. Also note that the Bill of Rights was not yet established. That would not happen until 1791. So these freedoms being in there were important. But one of the most significant and controversial provisions was the ban on slavery in the Northwest Territory. This meant that new states formed from the territories would be free states. Now remember, this was in 1787. Almost 80 years before the Civil War. The prohibition on slavery in the Northwest Territory drew a clear line between free and slave regions in the U.S. and would eventually lead to growing tension between the North and the South. Then there was the Native American question. This was another important aspect. The ordinance promised that Native American lands would be treated with respect, and it forbade taking land without Native consent. Now, as we know, history tells us this promise was often broken. As settlers moved westward, conflicts with Native Americans and settlers escalated, leading to displacement and oftentimes warfare. So what were the results of the Northwest Ordinance? For one, it laid out the process that would be followed for future territorial expansion. This idea that new states would enter the Union as equals became a standard for how America grew from a small cluster of states to a nation that stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It also solidified the divide between free and slave states, which would grow deeper over time. The ordinance's ban on slavery in the Northwest Territory set a precedent for future territories, like those from the Louisiana Purchase or the Mexican Cession would have to wrestle with. This geographic divide between free and slave regions foreshadowed the Missouri Compromise in 1820 and later the fierce debate leading to the Civil War. But it wasn't all tension and division. The Northwest Ordinance also promoted civil liberties and education, ideas that helped define the U.S. as a young nation. It emphasized the importance of public schooling and laid the groundwork for expansion of democratic governance into these new territories. In many ways, the Northwest Ordinance was America's first major success in figuring out how to grow while maintaining unity, setting the stage for what would become manifest destiny of a nation spreading westward. We'll see this later in the mid-1800s. So to wrap up, the Northwest Ordinance wasn't just a legal document. It was a vision of how the U.S. could expand and incorporate new territories as equals, how it could promote rights and freedoms, and yes, how it could navigate the growing conflict over slavery. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you'll learn more about the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Have a great rest of the day.